Hi everybody. So I've been sitting here today piecing these little X and O blocks out of the Love Notes quilts. Let me pull this back so you can see. And there's 3 that are X's and 2 that are O's. You actually start the blocks the same way. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a little 1.5-inch square. So we're going to start sort of like, it's going to be sort of like snowballing the edges, but we're only going to do 2 sides. So we're going to do 2 opposite sides. Well, the way we've always used to do these, is to draw a line with a water-soluble pen or a friction marker down, from the corner to corner. And but these are really small, and so I'm going to show you how I do this with the laser light. The one thing they do tell you to do is to make a scant seam when you're sewing these, to do a scant seam so that it is not a full 1/4 inch. But what I have found with the laser light is that the laser light has a tendency to drift. The needle comes down on kind of the right side of the laser light. So I actually don't really have to do a scant. I can just run the laser light down, and then my needle has a tendency to be just a hair to the right, like on the right edge of my laser light. So the other thing you can do is you can move your needle over like a bump if you're afraid that you're not going to be quite scant enough. But I did mine all with just the laser light and the needle in the center. That seemed to work really well. So I'm going to show you, so we don't have to draw all these things. It's kind of nice. And I'm going to show you a little bit about chain piecing. So let's set up the machine here. A lot of you have these laser lights and stuff on your machines. And I tell you, and I'm not an expert piecer by any means, but I do like to piece, and the laser light sure makes things a lot faster. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use Q01, which is going to place my needle in the center. So it's the center needle position at 3.5. If you don't feel like your needle is scant enough, you will need to go back to your number 1 tab and use like 104, because in the piecing stitch, that it won't allow you to change your needle position. It's just the way the machine's set up. So if you think you're going to need to use your needle position, use 104. I normally don't, so I'm going to go back to my Q tab and use a Q01, and that puts the needle in the center. And then I'm going to turn on my laser light. So turning on your laser light's really easy. There's going to be an icon somewhere on your machine. On the luminaire, it's up here at the top. A lot of them are kind of down here towards the middle. And it looks like kind of like a little, well, it looks like home base with a line through it, kind of like a baseball home base and a line through it. So if you just touch that, if you have one of the older machines, it'll just turn on. On the luminaire, it gives us the option of on off, and then we can change the colors and the length of the laser light. I like to use the red because I usually can see that better. On this particular fabric, the red will work well anyway. I'm going to use the large length, or the longest one, so that I can see from corner to corner. These blocks are like 1.5 inches, so this works really well with this. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead. I've got it turned on. I'm just going to leave it in the center, and I didn't move the position of my laser light. I just left it in the center. I'm going to click close. And then the other thing that I like to do is I like to chain piece when I do these. So I do like all one side, and then I turn them around and do all the second side. So I like to have my pivot feature turned on. So someplace on your machines, most of you are going to have this pivot feature, and it looks like a foot with a little needle down through the middle of it. And it could be kind of down here towards the bottom. Most of them are in this area, somewhere around the middle of the screen or down here. So I've got this turned on, so it's going to work. And then what it does is when I stop, it lowers the needle and raises the foot, so I don't have to touch a bunch of buttons while I'm doing this. Okay? So I'm going to thread my machine here. I forgot to thread it, of course, before I started the video. And we're going to do a little piecing. So I've got the needle in the center, so I'm using Q01. And again, if you think you're going to need to move your needle position, go back to the number 1 tab and use like 104 or 103 instead, because then you can change your left-right shift. That means you can move the needle over a little bit to the right if you think you need to. I normally don't need to, because my stuff turns out pretty close by just doing it corner to corner, because the laser light, the needle is slightly on the right-hand side of the laser light, so it usually works out okay. All right, so we'll go back to my cube tab here again. Q01. Okay, got my pivot feature on. So now what I've done is I've laid my little squares on one corner. These are 2.5 inch squares and these are 1.5 inch squares. So I've got them all laid on the corners here for the one side. So I kind of got them ready before so I could start. And then I'm going to lay my laser light on the corner, and I think you can see the laser light fairly well tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get this up here and I'm going to lay my laser light right on the corner, the first corner, and then I'm going to aim down towards this one. So see that way, this way I don't have to draw all these lines in. So I'm just going to aim it down. Now I can see, and I don't know if you'll be able to see close enough, but I can see that my needle is just slightly, it's on the inside, the right side of that laser light. And that will give me a scant enough seam. So this is sort of like snowballing when you do make snowball blocks. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. So see how the foot raised up and the needle dropped? So now I can stick my next one up in here. Get my corner set up and run through. So I love the pivot feature because I can really get a lot of blocks done quickly. Now both of there's X blocks and O blocks, and they all start out the same way. So, but it just depends on how you turn them, which block they turn into. Okay, so there's another one. So I'm just going to keep going through here. I'm going to chain piece these through here. And I've got the needle in the center, and I've got my laser light on. And then I don't have to do so much drawing. It goes a lot faster. And this one's a little bit off, so I got to scooch it around a little bit here. I'm not the greatest cutter in the world, and I am by no means an expert piecer, but I get along pretty well, and my blocks turn out, you know, the right size and everything, so I'm usually pretty happy. But these little features with the laser light, and if you're not using your laser light, turn it on. It's super easy. You can manually just turn it on and use it. And I use it a lot for piecing, especially when I'm doing these little bitty blocks. So it sure saves me a lot of time having to draw all those lines down the middle of the block. And I don't think you can see it because I can't get close enough, but my laser light is, like I said, the needle is just like on the right-hand side of the laser light, which gives me kind of a scant seam allowance along here. All right, so we got this one done. All right, so that was the ones that I needed to do on this side. So we have to do another set. So I'm going to cut this off, and we'll just take the scissors and trim them in between. I like to trim them off because it's hard for me to get them turned correctly if I don't trim them. So we're just going to trim these apart here at the center. Just clip that little snip there, if I can get a hold of it. But when I was doing these this afternoon, I thought, you know, I probably should make a little video about some little tips on these, because I remember when they did Love Notes, the mystery quilt, over the summer, that people struggled a little bit with these blocks, because they're a little harder than some of the blocks they've done in the past, and they're not hard, but they're harder than some of the other blocks. Okay, so I'm ready to do the second. So we're going to do an opposite corner. So I'm going to do the other side of all of these, and I'll just put the little blocks on as we go. I'm going to line that up on the corner, drop my needle, and I'm going to aim down here to the other corner with my laser light. Okay, there's my pivot. Grab another little block here. So hopefully this is helping you so that you can see how easy these are with the laser light. I just love the laser light on these machines, and you can do a lot of other things too, but I use it a lot for corner to corner stuff, like when I'm doing binding and stuff like that. I do a lot of corner to corner work with short squares, and this works really, really slick, and it's super easy. Because I tried doing these a little earlier with moving my needle a little bit, and then it really moved my needle too far. So I just went back to the way I've always done these, kind of corner to corner, because that needle is just on the right-hand side of the laser light. So it's not it's not straight down the middle. So, all right, we're just about done here. Got a couple more to do. Okay. Corner to corner. But I love this pivot because, see, then I didn't have to touch a bunch of a bunch of buttons to get the machine to go. I am using a foot controller. It also works with the button if you're using the button up here. It also works with that. And it's something that I use. I have on most of the time. I have slowly learned to chain piece as I've been piecing. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not an expert quilter, but I have learned to chain piece and I really like it. So here we go. We're going to do another corner to corner here. Got one more to do. So you can see me do all these corners, and then I also did all of the ones for the X's, and I've already got my X blocks sewn together. So I'll sew these together for you and I'll show you the X blocks. All right, so I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video for a few minutes because I'm going to go and trim these with my rotary cutter. I'm going to trim these 1/4 of an inch on the, you know, the outside of the corner so I can trim some of this bulk off, because then these are going to be flipped over this way. And then your squares will still be 2.5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and trim these, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how I'm going to sew these together. So I'm just going to pause the video for a minute. Okay, so I got these trimmed, so you can see that I trimmed these to 1/4 inch, and then they said in the instructions to go ahead and press them to the darker color. So I pressed them inward to the green from the white. And when I did my red ones, of course, I pressed them inward to the red. So that's the way they said to do it. And depending then on how you lay these, it's going to be a different letter. So like these are my X's. So the X's you laid with the tips like this. So that you started out with the same block. So this would have been the X's like this. Let's put them up a little bit higher so you can see them like this. Okay. And then, but the O's, these are my X's then. I got all my X's done. So these are the little red X's. So the reds, they were red for the X's, and then these kind of turquoise color for the O's. So to do the O's then, what I'm going to do is we're going to lay them a different direction. So I'm going to turn them inward this way so that they're made like this. And then like these bottom ones would be like this and like this. So then it looks like an O. Okay, so that way and we only need 2 O's. I had 3 X's and we need 2 O's. So what I'm going to do is I've got them laid out the way I want them. And so I'm going to flip this over like this. This is the top one, and we're going to sew along this line, and I want to make sure I line up my little seams here so they match up nice in the center. And then I'm going to put a pin there. I like to put a pin where there's like an intersection to keep it from scooting on me. Okay, I'm going to set this over here, and then we're just going to change our stitch now to Q02. I like to piece with my J-foot instead of with a piecing foot because I'm lazy and don't like to change the foot, and I also feel like I get a better quality 1/4 inch with the piecing stitch on Q02 because then also the foot rides over the bumps a lot better. So I am going to go ahead and turn off my laser light now. So my laser light is right here. So I'm just going to touch that, and then if you have some of the other machines, if you just touch it again, it'll turn off. This one I have to hit the little off button and then hit close. Okay, so I've got my laser light turned off now because I don't need it anymore. I'm going to use Q02, and we're going to run the edge of my foot right along the edge of the fabric. Now I don't want it to be like a complete full 1/4 inch because these are pretty small. So I'm just tucking the edge of the fabric under the foot to get a nice scant 1/4 inch. Because I just can't see the edge of my fabric. Okay, we're going to do that side. And then I'm going to do the other one. And then, oops, second here. So here's the first part of the O. And then this one needs to go like this. So we get them right. I always have to lay them out so that I know that I'm getting them oriented correctly. I have trouble. This is, like I said, I'm not an expert piecer. As long as I have a good picture to show me what it's supposed to look like, I can sew the seams okay. I just have a little trouble sometimes getting them put together correctly and in the right orientation. So, okay, so I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I like to drop my needle in the edge of the fabric, just get started, and I just have my fabric just tucked under the edge, so it's kind of a scant 1/4 inch. All right, so there's the other half. Oops. And then what I want to do, this is the other half, so this is the bottom half. So what I like to do when I go to sew these two halves together to make my letter, I like to turn that seam I've always done it this way, like the odd rows I turn the seam to the left, and the even rows I turn the seam to the right, because that way they nest nicely in the center. So I'm going to go ahead, I've got my iron right here, I'm just going to iron this. So I've got the top one turned to the left, so I'll just press this real quick like that. And then the bottom one, I got to make sure I get it. It fell on the front here, so, or on the front of my table here, so I have to make sure I get it. And then I want this one going to the right because it's the second row, so that they'll nest nicely together. And I'm pressing that one. So then there's that one. So there's the top, the top and the bottom of my O. So now I'm going to go ahead and flip these right sides together, and I'm going to nest those little seams in the center. But then I also want to make sure I'm nesting. I want to make sure that I'm lining up this seam and this seam. That's where like the little corners of the O will be. Put my pins out, so I like to put a pin in here. I always put a pin on both sides of my nested seam, because if I don't, it always moves. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to get those lined up real nice, and I'm going to put a pin there. That's why I like these little skinny little magic pins, because I can drive over them slowly and they don't harm my machine. So it's very rare that I hit one because they're so thin. And if, you know, I do throw away a lot of pins because it does bend them, with the foot bends them when they go over, but it sure keeps things from moving on me. Okay, so we're going to do the center seam now. And again, my 1/4 inch, I'm going to make it kind of a scant 1/4 inch, drop my needle at the edge. I've just got the edge of the fabric under my foot, so I can't see it. Didn't get these quite lined up. There we go. And I'm not going very fast over those pins. I'm going to cut it off. And then let's see how we did. So hopefully this looks nice when I opened it up. And there's the little O block. Now what I like to do with these, they're kind of bulky in the center. So normally with these, I like to open the seam allowance in the center up, and lay it flat like this. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the camera again just for a minute. And I'll do the other block, and then I will show you all of my completed blocks. So I'll pause the video again. Okay, so I have pressed these and pressed the centers open. They seem to lay a little bit better. So here's my little O blocks, and they measure 4.5 by 4.5. And then here's this one. So I've got 2 of the little blue O blocks, and I've got 3 of the red X blocks. So I've got all of my piece blocks done for row number 2. And if you have any questions, you can text me, message me through Facebook, give me a call at the store. But I thought you might like a little video about piecing these blocks, because I know people struggled a little bit. They are a little bit harder than some of the blocks that they've done in the past. So anyway, I enjoyed doing them. I like to piece a little bit. I don't get to do it very often. And so that's your little X and O blocks for row 2 of Love Notes. Thank you.